Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the show, we have Beau Billington. Beau is the founder of Free Agent, a consulting company immersed in the strategic layer of the gig economy. The Free Agent has a vetted bench of executive leaders with backgrounds in sales, marketing, and technology, and are available for fractional, interim, or full-time work. They work with a multitude of industries and disciplines with a keen focus on technology companies with revenues ranging from $10 to $200 million. Beau is on the mission to be the connective tissue between high-growth companies and the personnel they need most. Awesome with Beau. Thanks for being on, man.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Raul.
But one of the cool things that I learned about you when we first got introduced was how you leveraged probably one of the most growing trends in our society, and it's called the gig economy. So from a high level view, can you give me your perspective of where are we in the gig economy and how you've been able to leverage that to what you're doing at Free Agent?
So great question. And again, thanks for having me on. Great to be sitting here with you. So gig economy is something I kind of stumbled into, to be honest with you, right? This was circa 2015, I believe. And I was sitting in Toronto. It was like 2 days before Christmas, just had my first kid. And I was in Toronto because somebody told me I should be there, and I was just about to get snowed in. So I was really nervous about missing my first Christmas, pretty disappointed, watching ESPN, and they're talking about, so-and-so the free agent, right? And so I started thinking to myself, how cool would it be if I could go where I needed to be when I needed to be there and not basically have bosses and just this overall bureaucracy that we're all used to in corporate America. And so, really started doing some investigation into that world, into that realm. And that's literally how I kind of stumbled into the gig economy, as well as starting and founding my company, The Free Agent. It was kind of happenstance. I was sitting there, and it dawned upon me that maybe there's a situation out there from a work perspective that could be a better fit for me personally.
Interesting. So when it comes to the gig economy, how are you pairing up? I guess, are you like in the middle of managing and making sure that people get paired up with the right workers, or how are you, strategically helping in the sales, marketing, and tech?
Great question. So, ultimately, I like to kind of say that we're the conduit for opportunity for independent consultants. Okay. Right? Ultimately, we're kind of and so we sit there at the intersection between the consultants as well as the companies. And ultimately, our job is to have a conversation with the companies, help them understand their gaps, and then leverage our network, leverage the economy to help them overcome their gaps. So ultimately, we'll go into our bench of resources, have discussions with them, and then ultimately bring the right individual to the table that has same background, same skills, and has overcome problems and challenges that our customers are currently facing.
Well, Beau, it's interesting that you're able to look at the gaps that companies have. For our listeners today, and as well as, for the business owners out there, what are some of the tools or strategies that you use to identify gaps within companies, and how can we do an introspection in the company to identify what are we missing?
Sure. Great question. So it really starts with having a discussion and being open and honest with your gaps and taking an inventory of what those gaps actually are. And, one of the ways that we really kind of attack situations is by leveraging our network and bringing in these industry experts discussions to have, real, raw, authentic dialogue with our customers. And so, for instance, if we're, talking about a challenge that may be in the sales silo, marketing silo, or technology silo, which are really kind of the three silos we work across, I will bring in an industry expert after the initial discussion to really have kind of about an hour to an hour and a half, maybe 2 hour discovery session and deep dive. And so that really, puts us in a position to have a much, much, much better understanding as to the specific challenge that our customers or prospects are going through. And a lot of that really has to do with mind share. And again, bringing in individuals, bringing in, people, experts that have, seen the potential challenge before.
That's interesting that you mentioned the mind share, because that's kind of like exponential growth there, just in the way to dissect a problem. Are there specific questions that you ask, or are there specific metrics that you look through for? Let's say we're looking at sales or marketing or tech. Within those rounds, I know there's different questions, but is there an overlap of questions that we can leverage or use in our own companies?
So that's a great question, and I wish that I had specifics to go through here, Raul. But not every situation and solution is a one size fits all.
True.
Right. And so
100%.
really, kind of in the initial discovery session that I generally conduct myself is 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour conversation with the company where we do a deep dive on the challenge that they believe that they're having. And so part of our methodology is to bring in experts at a later date. But in regards to kind of quantifying a challenge or metrics that we look at on the front end, it's really challenging to kind of, relay what that is to you, because again, every situation that we encounter is kind of a one-off.
True. Yeah. And it's, you mentioned it, you kind of nailed it on the head. Is like, when you're talking about what are the challenges that you think you're having versus the ones that you're actually having. So I guess a better question would be, looking at these different areas, sales, marketing, or tech, what are some of the common issues that you've seen happen? And like, what are some of the pitfalls that we could avoid?
So great question. So a lot of the challenge that we look at, and I'd say, 80% of the business that we do is between the sales and the technology silos.
Interesting.
And, zeroing in sales, I'd say that's probably where the majority of the challenges are, because technology, a lot of the times it's binary. It's either an issue or it's not.
Yeah.
Right? And you can kind of dive into what that issue is and do corrective action. On the sales side, a lot of times you're actually dealing with personnel issues. Maybe it's the company hasn't clearly defined their value proposition. Maybe it's sales operationally. There's some challenges there. Again, maybe it's personnel. But the issues on the sales side have been quite interesting to tackle, to be honest with you. And on the sales side of the house in particular, 9 times out of 10, I feel like the company feels a challenge is one thing, but after deep dive and further analysis, it's generally something else. And what I've seen too is that a lot of companies think that if you just hire good salespeople, then they should be able to do their job and they should be able to drive sales. Unfortunately, it's not that simplistic. And the nuances, have to do with delivery, with value prop. Are you set up for success, et cetera? So there's a lot of different items you can encounter when you kind of open the hood.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and I like how you're able to dissect it in 2 separate portions, right? Like the technology, it's either 1010 works or it doesn't work because it's technology, it's a machine. And obviously it's either human error or tech error. And I think it's not easier to do, but I think it's more simple to dissect as opposed with sales, where it's all human and organic and managing people. And so diving into sales, I love how you mentioned having a proper USP, making sure that it's clear and presented clearly to customers at all levels and all stages. Do you also focus around like creating the operation procedures for how to get people through different pipeline stages, or is that some of the issues you're seeing as well on the sales side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, fundamentally you need to look at, do you have the right USP in place? If so, check, go to the next step.
Yeah.
And funnel is a tremendously tough component to business. And a lot of the times with companies that we deal with, they're high growth, they're 10 million to, upwards of 200 million, but really within that 10 million to 40 million kind of range, you're working with a lot of founders that may be technically savvy, but maybe don't understand the sales side, or have some other background, right? And so there's also a lot of nuances as it pertains to funnel and how that should be arranged, how that should be managed, and in particular as it pertains to the industry that you service and the industry that you focus on, right? B2B, different from B2C. So there's a lot of challenges as it pertains to funnel and how that's managed appropriately.
So I'm looking at my sales organization right now, and let's say, that I'm managing them, on a weekly basis. What are some of the things that you've seen that have been overlooked when it comes to the sales team, especially when we're heavily focused on selling, on the tech side, cybersecurity, online SaaS? What are some of the things that you would suggest for tech sales teams?
So a couple of things that come to mind with what you just mentioned. First and foremost, I think hiring is actually overlooked and quite tough, right? Not only do you need to find somebody with kind of the right background and skill set, but also right culture fit. So I feel like far too many people feel that if they just pay enough money or hire somebody that's senior enough, that all their problems will cease to exist, right? So that's one component of the equation, is ensuring that you have the right people in-house that can actually execute against your plan. A lot of times companies utilize commission-only salespeople when maybe there's large constraints, right? And I really think that there is for commission-only individuals. In fact, I use them in my business from time to time, but they can also be hard to keep motivated if the sales cycle and the solution and the product is not primed for that type of commission structure or that type of compensation structure.
Yeah.
Right. And so it really depends on what it is that you are selling, what the sales cycle is, and the complexity. And I think that, for more transactional type of sales engagements where maybe, you're closing a deal once a week, once a month, et cetera, they can be more appropriate. But as you're talking about more strategic, it can be a hard sell, no pun intended, for the actual salesperson that is expected to go out, eat what they kill, but not eat unless they kill.
Yeah, and I love that perspective, and I appreciate that answer, because I think there is no right or wrong. It always depends on the variables of the factors: sales cycle, volume, commission structure, as well as do you have enough leads coming into the pipeline to actually fulfill on a commission-only structure. And I think it's, this is not a one-size-fits-all answer, and it has to be dissected and appropriate to your team, your culture, as well as where you want to go, like the future vision. But I think
you brought up a good point, though, is the lead flow, right? Yeah. I mean, if there are enough leads and, it's not that complex of a sell, not to diminish, more transactional sells, but I think that could be an opportunity for companies to kind of save money, not have to pay a base salary, utilize a commission-only structure, but it's got to be the right mix. And you got to find the right person. A lot of people don't have the ability to float 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks between paychecks.
Yeah. And it's also like the hunter mentality, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, moving into the gig economy, I know that the way that you've had to structure your company, you kind of had to do two things at once, right? You had to position yourself in the marketplace. You had to position yourself also to create community around free agents. So can you talk a little bit more about, both creating an online community, but also positioning yourself for success?
Great question. Yeah. So in regards to starting my company, when I actually started it, the vision was really around creating a virtual marketplace where, our executive level subject matter experts can join our platform, companies can join the platform, and they can interact and create commerce themselves, right? And go off into the sunset. And that's the overarching vision of the company. But when I started it, I really kind of found out that it wasn't that simplistic.
Yeah.
That I was in this kind of double-sided marketplace.
Yeah.
And, you really kind of need enough free agents for it to make sense. You need enough, jobs and companies for it to make sense. But you really need to kind of find this perfect harmony. And without that, there's not enough value for either side of the equation, right? So building out this marketplace and this community has been really challenging, Raul, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And, some of the learnings that I've kind of uncovered over the last, I'd say 6 months or so in this journey is that, engagement is a key component to building out this community and ensuring that, both sides of the equation are actually engaged. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, that's been, I'd say the biggest learning curve for me is realizing that, it's one thing to draw people to the community, but it's something entirely different to get them engaged and get them kind of working together towards the common goal.
Hmm. How did you foster that harmony though? Like, do you have them in your separate groups? Is it just via email? Like how are you engaging and creating community?
Great question. So it's a work in progress. It's one of those things where I've got, a roadmap over the next 3 to 5 years of plans, and I'm just continuously kind of trying to, chip away at that roadmap. But ultimately, I, as the founder of my company, The Free Agent, am trying to take a more active role in bringing the community together. So for instance, whenever I meet a new free agent, one of my goals is to introduce that person to 3 people, not 1, not 2, but 3 people they would consider peers, right? With similar backgrounds where they can essentially talk shop. And, it's funny, I had a conversation with somebody about networking, and the reason I use 3 is because evidently that is the magic number, right? 1 introduction is not memorable, 2 is not memorable, but 3, you get somebody 3 introductions, and all of a sudden they think that you're really doing stuff, to help them out in their journey, right? So that's been kind of one component to it, is literally trying to drive engagement between the folks in my community with real valuable discussions with peers, and not just phoning it in and introducing them to Bob, in XYZ industry, but people that have very similar and common interests.
That's so important, and it's not easy. That's so not easy. Like, I remember I was talking to Michelle Kwok, and she created a startup community, or a female founders community to support female startups in regards to resources, interns, hiring, et cetera. And she grew like 4,500 different founders across the world. Mm-hmm. And she spoke to every single one of them, every single one. And it's like that effort is not easy, but building community is also not easy. So that's extremely important. It's a good takeaway for all of our listeners is, if you're building community, how are you engaging with your members, and how are you significantly adding value? Introducing to 3 people, that creates the network effect and the viral effect, right?
Well, to your point too, though, is, and I guess I mirror kind of what Michelle was doing as well, kind of unbeknownst to me, but, within my community, no one's allowed in without me actually having a conversation with them for at least 30 minutes, if not an hour or longer. Wow. And typically I prefer to have 2 discussions, right, before they're actually, part of the community. And I think that personal touch makes all the difference, because in communities like LinkedIn and others where they're completely open, there's not really a sense of community, right? And with mine, I'm trying to create like, hey, it actually, there was some effort that not only did the founder put in for me to get into this network, but I also had to kind of, put a little bit of skin in the game as well. And I think that kind of gives people a vested interest to really kind of help grow the community, and also kind of keep it, I'd say, consistent of like-minded individuals.
No, and I love that. So obviously this depends on the type of community that you're building. And if it's mass scale, sometimes you can't meet with them 2 times for 30 minutes, but also for the quality of the community. And I was talking to Larry Kessling yesterday, and he's been like in the community peer group or growth, he would say around 25 years. He'd be in that industry for 25 years. And he mentions that typically for a good community, it's around 250 people. Anything more than that, it becomes a town. So it depends. Again, what are you building? Are you building a 10,000 group membership? Are you building a 100-person, 10-person? And I think the quality will always triumph. So I wrote that down. Beau, thanks for sharing that. But, going on the flip side, on the gig economy now, you're on a double-sided market. So you're focusing on first the free agents, then you're focusing on the marketplace itself. How do you make sure that you cut through the noise for every other, business or company that's pretty much trying to take market share in the gig economy?
Yeah, so great question. I think that also goes back to community and trying to create a community. So a lot of the competitors that I have, and they are numerous, and honestly, it feels like it's somewhat of an arms race, Raul, because companies are popping up left and right. But a lot of them have these open networks. The vetting is very, very weak, and there's no community feel. I know one of my I don't want to say closest competitors, but one of the competitors touts themselves as having 40,000 consultants in their network, right? Well, I don't know who's benefiting from having 40,000 people in their network, other than the company that's actually the intermediary between the consultants and the companies that need them.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I don't know if I can touch 40,000 people, even if I did it once a day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't even spend the time, creating a proposal for a company if I was competing against 40,000 people, right? It just doesn't make sense. And so the way that I'm able to kind of cut through the noise is that not only are the people that are part of our community, they are vetted, but so are the companies as well as the opportunities. And so, we're trying to kind of be the antithesis of what LinkedIn is going through right now. And that's any opportunity that's posted within our community is vetted. It is real. And so I think that has allowed us to kind of, stay above the fray and cut through a lot of the noise, because right now there is a tremendous amount of noise, and the majority of the companies are merely worried about eyeballs, and quantity versus quality. And that's really kind of what I'm focused on is the quality of the work. And I would be fine if, my community tapped out at, 500,000 people, so long as everybody's getting work and is gainfully employed, I'm happy.
That's significant. So you're triumphing on quality, connections, as well as having almost like loops for people to jump through to even be able to work with you.
Yeah, I mean that, and also I'm trying to find equilibrium, right? Where, there's some sort of, and I don't know the answer to this question, honestly, Raul. I don't know what this is yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But I'm trying to find the equilibrium where, it's X amount of quote unquote free agents within our network and X amount of companies, right? What does that look like where there's enough opportunity for everybody that we partner with? That's really kind of my mission. And if I can do that, then that's real value.
That's fine. Yeah, that's even a cool slogan, finding equilibrium.
Okay, I just wrote that down, just so you know.
That's a pretty cool. Well, as you continue to grow the community members, focus on the gig economy, being able to position yourself for success, what are some of the next stages or growth curves that you're looking at to pretty much grow this startup?
Yeah, so for me is, again, it all goes back to engagement. I realized that this was a gap of mine about 6 to 8 months, and I've been doing everything in my power to kind of fix that. And so, in addition to networking, making sure that the individuals within the community are introduced to each other and are kind of having their own discussions, their own dialogue, I'm going to try to leverage my brand and my platform to provide these consultants with, I'd say, even more exposure than maybe they had previously. And what I mean by that is that, we're going to start focusing on, different webinars. We're going to have a podcast next year and really bring in these thought leaders that we have in our community that we're real proud of and give them more of a spotlight and the opportunity to leverage our platform to get their name out there, as well as kind of, what they're able to do for businesses that are in need.
I love that. That's a pretty smart way of doing it. And I know we didn't hit on that too much on this podcast, but podcasting itself has strategies, not just business development, but also relationship building. So, I mean, I know that we've been talking a lot in regards to sales, gig economy, and growth, but I do want to touch on like how important it is that you're building that kind of engagement level, because podcasting, it helps with strategic partners, helps with the free agents itself, helps with getting the marketplace, knowing who you are, and as well as future clients that can be on the podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's also fun. What's funny though, is I've been thinking and talking about starting my podcast for a better part of 2 years now. Right. And like, there's been so many other things that I've had to focus on that I've continued to put on the back burner. Yeah. I think it's been the right call, but it's not one of those things that I at least haven't been able just to spin it up. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to, obviously I'm not rushing, right? If anything, I'm too slow. But I see it's very, very important, but for me, it's a matter of timing. And I think I'm finally at the point where the timing makes sense.
That's wonderful. I think that's a better question to ask. What made you see that this is the right time for a podcast? What were some of the triggers or feedback loops in the business that made you aware of that?
So I can't stand this phrase, but I feel like a lot of the blocking and tackling that I've needed to do has been done, right? And so I'm finally at a point where not a good portion, but there's components to the business that have been automated. Yeah. Right. That has kind of freed myself up as well as the individuals on my team to focus on other aspects, i.e. starting a podcast. Love it. And so I've really tried to be tactical. Sometimes I'm good at it. Sometimes I'm not. But for me, it's good to have the overall vision and then work towards that. And I feel that I've put to rest a lot of the other initiatives that I've needed to do so that I can really now kind of focus on phase 2, which is now leveraging my brand as a platform for our consultants.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's a really good way of looking at it too, making sure that you have the systems in place, but also having the bandwidth to do it and not bite off more than you can chew, and making sure that you do everything with quality, which again, going back to what you've been doing with the community is essential. Well, Beau, for all of our listeners out there today, what's the best place for people to thank you for this episode and also reach out to you and learn more about you?
Yeah. So website currently thefreeagent.com is probably the best place. I'm going to roll out a personal website in 2021, and I will share that when the timing is appropriate. But probably the
Perfect.
best place to find me is the URL that I just shared. And Raul, can't mention it enough. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure being with you today.
I appreciate it, Beau. We'll talk soon, brother.
Sounds good. Thanks.